Pablo Escobar's story is one of the most dramatic and disturbing tales in modern history, a journey from petty crime to global domination, and eventually to death, but it is also a story that did not end with his fall. Even decades later, the legend of Escobar continues to resurface in the form of hidden vaults, buried money, and secrets that still cause fascination and fear. His empire was built on blood, bribes, and an endless stream of cocaine, but beneath the surface, literally underground, lay chambers that revealed even darker truths. Recent discoveries of safes and hidden rooms have brought this world back into focus, reminding everyone that Escobar's reach went far beyond the obvious riches he flaunted in public. Escobar's beginnings were not the grand tales of a genius businessman or a revolutionary leader. He started with desperation, crime, and ambition that grew into something monstrous. In the streets of Medellín, he was a teenager looking for ways to climb out of poverty. At first, he stole tombstones, erased names with sandblasters, and sold them back to grieving families who thought they were new. Soon, he moved to stealing cars, extorting locals, and ordering kidnappings. The brutality with which he conducted these crimes shocked people even in a country already familiar with violence. When businessman Diego Echeverría was kidnapped and killed in 1971, Escobar's group not only made $50,000 from ransom but also earned a reputation for being merciless. His rise from petty theft to organized crime was fueled by the belief that both money and death could be tools of control. His discovery of cocaine changed everything. By the mid-1970s, trafficking routes were being set up, and Escobar saw the immense potential. When he was caught in 1976 with 39 kilograms of cocaine hidden inside car tires, he didn't panic. Instead, he used bribery to escape justice and arranged for the death of the officer who arrested him. This became his lifelong philosophy: take the bribe or face the bullet. The phrase plata o plomo, meaning silver or lead, summed up his approach perfectly. Either his enemies accepted his money, or they were destroyed. The more money he made, the more people he could corrupt, and the more people he could intimidate into silence. It was a vicious cycle that kept expanding his empire. By 1978, Escobar had joined forces with other traffickers, and together they created the Medellín cartel. Their operations soon controlled nearly all cocaine entering the United States, with shipments reaching as much as 19,000 kilograms a month. One of their key strongholds was Norman's Cay in the Bahamas, where an airstrip, dock, and refrigerated warehouses turned the island into a fortress for smuggling. From this single operation, Escobar's profits became so large that he could barely keep track of them. With his fortune growing faster than it could be counted, Escobar decided to reshape his image. He built Hacienda Napoles, a 7,000-acre estate filled with lakes, a mansion, a zoo with exotic animals, and even life-sized dinosaur statues. It was a strange mix of luxury, intimidation, and showmanship. At the same time, he gave away money to the poor, built houses and schools, and positioned himself as a Robin Hood figure to the people of Medellín. For many, he was the man who gave them hope, even as he spread terror behind the scenes. Escobar's charm and generosity to the poor opened the door to politics. In 1982, he became a member of Congress, protected by diplomatic immunity and able to travel the world. He lied about the source of his wealth, claiming it came from a teenage bicycle rental business, while his billions were secretly generated by cocaine. His political career didn't last long. Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla exposed him as a drug trafficker, and soon after, Lara was assassinated. Escobar's enemies knew that to confront him was often to invite death. Judges, politicians, and even presidential candidates were not safe. He fought relentlessly against extradition to the United States, funding groups that planted bombs and attacked officials. In 1985, the Palace of Justice was stormed, and more than half of Colombia's Supreme Court justices were killed. Though direct evidence of Escobar's involvement was never proven, suspicion always surrounded him. His violence against the state escalated until in 1989, he ordered the assassination of Luis Carlos Galen, a presidential candidate who opposed him. Weeks later, he had a passenger plane bombed in an attempt to kill another political rival. More than 100 innocent lives were lost, including 2 Americans, bringing the United States directly into the fight against him. Despite his brutality, Escobar's cartel was unimaginably powerful. By the late 1980s, it was responsible for 80% of the world's cocaine supply. Every day, more than 15 tons of cocaine entered the United States, carried by planes, boats, and even submarines. His cartel earned more than $400 million every week, and his personal fortune was estimated at tens of billions of dollars, making him one of the richest men in the world. Forbes listed him as a billionaire for 7 straight years. He owned mansions, islands, rare cars, private planes, and entire neighborhoods. His estate Hacienda Napoles became a surreal mixture of wealth and absurdity. In Medellin, he built the Monaco building, a fortress with pools, tennis courts, and panic rooms. He had properties in the Caribbean, Miami, and all across Colombia. His car collection included rare Porsches, luxury Cadillacs, motorcycles once owned by celebrities, and even vehicles used in James Bond films. The extravagance seemed endless, but behind it was a man who trusted no one and was prepared to burn millions of dollars just to keep his daughter warm on a cold night. Money was so abundant that it became both a blessing and a curse. Escobar had more cash than he could ever spend, launder, or even hide. Warehouses and underground chambers were filled with stacks of bills, and farms across Antioquia hid barrels of dollars underground. His brother later admitted that more than $2 billion a year was lost to rats, mold, and water damage. The cartel even spent thousands of dollars every month just on rubber bands to hold the money together. These absurd realities only made the legend of Escobar's hidden fortune grow larger. Stories spread of underground tunnels, secret chambers, and vaults guarded by steel doors. Each vault held not just money but also weapons, documents, and sometimes even torture rooms. His paranoia meant that no bank was trusted, no accountant fully relied on, and only a few family members knew the locations of the hidden fortunes. When he died, the mystery of what remained buried became as fascinating as the story of his life. After his death in 1993, Colombia erupted in relief, but new questions replaced the old ones. What had happened to the billions of dollars Escobar had hidden? Rumors of vaults and safes only intensified. Some finds were real. Millions of dollars were uncovered in barrels, in walls, and beneath estates. In 2016, when his old Miami mansion was demolished, workers found safes hidden in the foundation. Some disappeared before they could be opened, fueling suspicions that people had stolen them. In Colombia, farmers sometimes unearthed drums of money so well preserved they looked freshly buried. In other cases, the bills had rotted into useless scraps. Escobar's nephew claimed to have found $18 million in 2020, guided by what he described as a vision. The Discovery Channel even launched a series where former CIA operatives searched for Escobar's millions using advanced equipment. They found empty safes but also evidence of how carefully Escobar had hidden his wealth, from concrete bunkers to lead-lined vaults. The search was dangerous, because even decades later, Escobar's legacy was tied to violence and fear. The darker discoveries were not just about money. Inside his vaults, investigators often found weapons AK-47s, grenades, rocket launchers stockpiled as if preparing for war. They also uncovered ledgers that recorded bribes, shipment schedules, and secret financial transactions, mapping the reach of his cartel across continents. These documents were even more dangerous than guns, because they revealed just how deep his influence ran into politics, law enforcement, and international networks. Accounts also described underground rooms designed for torture and intimidation, a reminder of how fear was just as much a tool for Escobar as money. His paranoia extended even to his own imprisonment. When he agreed to surrender in 1991, it was under the condition that he would not be extradited. Instead of going to a real prison, he built his own La Cathedral, a luxury fortress on a mountain. It had a football field, a bar, a jacuzzi, and even escape routes. From there, Escobar continued to run his cartel as if nothing had changed, until eventually the government could no longer tolerate his mockery of justice. Pablo Escobar's story is one of contradiction. He was a man who built houses for the poor but blew up airplanes full of innocent people. He was a father who burned money to keep his daughter warm but ordered thousands of killings without hesitation. He was one of the richest men in history, yet he could not spend most of his wealth because it was buried underground. Even in death, His presence lingers through the safes, barrels, and vaults that continue to surface. Each discovery reignites the fascination with his life, not just because of the money, but because of the reminder that power built on fear and blood cannot last forever. Escobar believed his money could buy him safety and immortality, but the billions he left behind have only become symbols of a legacy defined by greed, violence, and paranoia. The truth about his empire lies not just in the cocaine that flooded the world but in the hidden vaults that continue to whisper stories of a man who thought he could bury his secrets forever. In 1992, shocking reports spread across Colombia that Pablo Escobar had ordered the torture and execution of 4 of his own men inside La Cathedral, the luxury prison he had built for himself. This scandal pushed the government into action. Authorities demanded that Escobar be moved to a regular prison, but he refused. In July, troops surrounded La Cathedral, but when they finally entered, Escobar was already gone. He had escaped through a wall built with weak concrete, a secret exit he had designed in advance. Once again, his obsession with hidden passages and escape routes saved him. La Cathedral was abandoned after his escape, but its legend grew. Years later, in 2007, Benedictine monks transformed the prison into a monastery, complete with a chapel, library, and memorial to Escobar's victims. Pilgrims still visit, walking the same grounds where Escobar had once ruled as both prisoner and king. Even after his death, rumors continued about secret tunnels. An FBI informant claimed that Escobar built underground catacombs with air circulation so he could hide for days. Colombian raids on his safe houses uncovered half-dug tunnels and shafts, proving that Escobar's obsession with hiding went beyond storing money. He had designed escape systems to stay one step ahead. But the very mindset that once saved him eventually helped lead to his downfall. American involvement in the hunt for Escobar began in 1989 when President George H.W. Bush authorized a secret mission called Operation Heavy Shadow. Its goal was to help Colombia dismantle the Medellin cartel. That same year, the United States sent in Centra Spike, a special army signals unit trained to track fugitives through intercepted radio and phone calls. Their surveillance drove Escobar deeper into hiding and helped bring down his powerful ally, José Rodríguez Garcha. Yet, even with years of monitoring, Escobar always slipped away, protected by loyalists inside Colombia's police and military. By 1991, he had secured a shocking deal with the government. He was allowed to live inside La Cathedral, where he continued running his empire. But when that deal collapsed in July 1992, Escobar became a fugitive once more. The escape humiliated Colombia. U.S. Ambassador Morris D. Busby was woken up by 2 phone calls. The first brought good news. Colombian President Cesar Gaviria had finally ordered Escobar's transfer from La Cathedral, something Busby had urged for over a year. The second call was devastating. Escobar had already escaped with 9 of his men. At the presidential palace, Gaviria was furious. He had ordered a military assault, but instead, the Vice Minister of Justice and the prison warden entered without authorization and were taken hostage. In one night, Colombia lost credibility, and years of U.S. pressure and funding seemed wasted. Gaviria had long resisted deeper American involvement, but humiliation changed his mind. He turned to Busby and asked for full U.S. support, vowing that Escobar would never again see a courtroom or prison cell. Busby, a former Navy officer and counterterrorism expert, saw his chance. If Escobar was left alone, he would rebuild his empire. He needed to be hunted quickly, while still vulnerable. Busby called Major Steve Jacobe, the man who had been quietly operating in Bogotá since 1989 with Centra Spike. Jacobe and his team had listened to Escobar's phone calls for years. They knew his calm, deliberate tone, his mix of Spanish and English, how he ordered kidnappings and reorganized his cartel, and how he tenderly spoke to his wife in the same breath. Jacobe believed he could track Escobar within days. The challenge was whether Colombian forces could act fast enough. Their raids were often slow, corrupt, and leaked directly to Escobar. Busby concluded only one team could close the gap: Delta Force, America's top counterterrorism unit. Inside the U.S. Embassy's secure vault, Busby, Jacobe, DEA Chief Joe Toft, and CIA station head Bill Wagner debated their options. Colombian law forbade foreign troops, but Busby argued Delta could be disguised as trainers and advisors. All agreed Escobar would never be taken alive. Prisons and trials had failed. This time, the hunt had to end with death. Washington responded quickly. President Bush, deeply invested in the war on cocaine, personally supported the plan. After consulting General Colin Powell, he ordered Defense Secretary Dick Cheney to give Busby whatever he needed. On July 26, a Delta Force team led by Colonel Jerry Boykin arrived in Bogotá under civilian cover. Just 2 days after his escape, Escobar reappeared with a letter to the media, signed Colombian Jungle Zone, July 24, 1992. He claimed the government had betrayed him, forcing him to flee, and even offered to return to prison if the United Nations guaranteed his safety. At the same time, Centra Spike intercepted his calls to lawyers. Escobar accused the U.S. of interfering in Colombia, instructing his attorneys to pressure President Gaviria. It was a calculated move to stir resentment against both the Colombian government and Washington. But Gaviria was firm. La Cathedral was gone, and Escobar was once again a fugitive. Centra Spike tracked him to a wealthy Medellin suburb only miles from his old prison. For the first time, the U.S. had both the tools and the political backing to act. By late July 1992, Colonel Hugo Martinez was chosen to lead the manhunt. Hardened by years of failure and personal danger, Martinez had survived assassination attempts, bombs planted under his home, and even a $6 million bribe. His refusal to bend defined him. Returning from Madrid, Martinez rebuilt the search block into a force of 600 men. Soldiers and police trained to be a disciplined strike unit with one goal: destroy Escobar. Unlike his arrogant predecessor, Martinez demanded results. His methods were harsh, sometimes brutal, but effective. The Americans provided intelligence and technology. Martinez enforced discipline and fear. For the first time, Escobar faced an enemy who could not be bribed or intimidated. Escobar's response was violence. He unleashed bombings and executions, striking civilians to pressure the government. Despite billions spent and advanced U.S. tracking tools, Escobar remained elusive. Centra Spike pinpointed his calls with precision. Delta and search block forces raided hideouts quickly, but Escobar adapted and escaped. When one of his top hitmen, Brant's Tyson Munoz, was killed, Escobar retaliated the same day, murdering 3 police officers. Funerals became routine, with widows fainting at gravesides as officers were buried weekly. His support began to collapse. The turning point came with the bookstore massacre, where innocent civilians were killed. Public outrage forced the government to officially declare Escobar public enemy number 1 and placed a massive bounty of 5 billion pesos, about $6.5 million, for his capture. Soon, a new group appeared, Los Pepes, which stood for people persecuted by Pablo Escobar. They bombed Escobar's properties, threatened his family, and executed his associates, leaving notes pinned to their bodies. Unlike the state, Los Pepes offered no trials, no deals, only death. Their brutal campaign made clear that anyone tied to Escobar would pay in blood. For Martinez and the Americans, Los Pepes became silent allies. Publicly, the U.S. condemned their violence. Privately, they saw how effective it was. Escobar, who had always hidden behind lawyers, political deals, and terror, now faced an enemy who used his own tactics against him. By early 1993, the manhunt reached new levels of brutality. At Search Block headquarters in Medellin, Martinez kept a drawer full of photographs of the dead. Showing them to a Delta operator, he said bluntly, "As long as I'm in charge, they will not live." His unit claimed dozens of lives, often recorded as casualties in gun battles. But the photographs told a different story: execution-style wounds to the head. Escobar still slipped away at the last moment, what Delta operators bitterly called the last 100 yards. Still, Martinez earned respect. Prisoners who resisted interrogation rarely survived, but those who cooperated were jailed instead. With American technology and his ruthless discipline, the search block became a relentless weapon. Meanwhile, pressure from the Colombian government complicated matters. Some officials, including the Attorney General, still pushed for surrender negotiations, something the US feared would repeat the La Cathedral disaster. In September 1993, a DEA memo warned Escobar might strike another false deal. Some of his men surrendered, including his brother Roberto Escobar and hitman John Jairo Velázquez, known as Popeye. But Pablo showed no interest. His lawyers kept negotiating, infuriating those risking their lives to kill him. Even Colonel Gustavo Bermudez publicly said he would rather see Escobar dead than captured, earning a death threat from Escobar's teenage son. Escobar's enemies grew. In 1992, he killed longtime partners Fernando Galeano and William Moncada. Their widows, Dolly Moncada and Mireya Galeano, sought revenge. With resources, knowledge, and support from Diego Murillo, known as Don Berna, they became leaders of Los Pepes. They recruited sicarios with payments of 20 million pesos each. Dolly Moncada, in particular, became dangerous. After Escobar murdered her husband, she lost her brother too, an MIT student kidnapped and killed despite having no cartel ties. Furious, she began working with the DEA as an informant under the codename AE92053. She provided detailed intelligence on Escobar's finances, properties, and lawyers, urging authorities to strip him of everything. Her vendetta shaped the ruthless campaign against Escobar. Other former allies also turned. Carlos Leder, once Escobar's flamboyant partner, sat in a U.S. prison seeking leniency. He described Escobar's safe houses, guards, and even his poor physical condition: overweight, unfit, and unable to run more than a few minutes. Fidel Castano, a former ally, also broke with Escobar after he murdered friends. He began supplying intelligence to U.S. and Colombian forces, even helping during raids. The walls were closing in. By late 1993, Escobar was desperate. Centra Spike perfected its tracking, focusing on his phone calls. Despite knowing the risk, Escobar couldn't resist calling his family. On December 2nd, the day after his 44th birthday, he called his son Juan Pablo for a long time. It was the slip the Americans had waited for. Within hours, Martinez's men converged on a modest house in Medellin's Los Olivos neighborhood. Inside, Escobar and his loyal bodyguard, Álvaro de Jesus Agudelo, nicknamed El Limón, were hiding. A policeman spotted a long-haired, bearded man in an upstairs window. He looked older and heavier, but they knew it was him. The assault began. El Limón ran first, crashing through a window and sprinting across the roof, but gunfire cut him down. Escobar followed, carrying 2 pistols, including the one he had once handed over at La Cathedral. He fired back while scrambling across the rooftops, but 3 bullets struck him, 1 in the leg, 1 in the back, and 1 through the ear. Minutes later, the world's most wanted man lay dead beside his bodyguard. The question of who fired the fatal shot remains a mystery. Some claimed it was Search Block Officer Hugo Aguilar. Others said it was Los Pepes. Conspiracy theorists insisted U.S. agents pulled the trigger. The official autopsy ruled a gunshot to the head, but later tests suggested it may have been a close-range pistol shot, not a rifle. Some believed Escobar had killed himself to avoid capture, as he had always promised. Others suspected he was executed at point-blank range. The truth may never be known. Still, one fact was certain: Pablo Escobar's reign ended that day. His body, photographed on the rooftop, became a symbol. For many Colombians, it meant freedom after years of terror. For others, it meant that one form of violence had simply been replaced by another, as Los Pepes continued their bloody campaign with quiet government support. To the world, the image of Escobar's lifeless body showed the end of a man once worshipped in Medellin but finally hunted down in the same city that had made him powerful. This was the final chapter of a life built on power, fear, and violence. Escobar's empire crumbled, his allies betrayed him, and his enemies grew stronger. His death brought relief, but it also left behind questions, legends, and a legacy that still haunts Colombia today.